Voicemail came in at 2047 in the afternoon, and I was standing in the middle of my boss's office with a glass of sparkling water in my hand when my phone buzzed against my thigh. I didn't check it. I couldn't. Because my boss, Diane, was smiling at me in that specific way she smiles when something good is about to happen, and she said, "The committee made their decision this morning. We'd like you to step into the senior operations manager role, effective the 1st of next month." I remember nodding. I remember the water fizzing in the glass. I remember thinking, this is the moment, the one that I'd been working toward for 6 years. 6 years of early mornings and late nights, and missed happy hours and a performance review where I sat across from a man who told me I needed to be more assertive, and I smiled and said thank you, and went home and practiced being more assertive in my bathroom mirror at 11 o'clock at night. Senior operations manager, at 31. The drive home felt like floating. I had the windows down even though it was cold, and I was playing the same song on repeat, and I kept thinking about how I was going to tell my husband, how I'd walk in and he'd look up from whatever he was doing and I'd say the words and he'd pull me into a hug and we'd probably open that bottle of wine we'd been saving since our anniversary. I had the whole scene in my head before I even pulled into the driveway. My husband Curtis was on the couch when I walked in. He was in his usual spot, the left cushion, the one that's starting to sag on his side, with his laptop open and his headphones halfway on. The kind of halfway that means he can hear you, but wants you to think he can't. "Hey," I said. "Hey." I set my bag down. I stood there for a second waiting. He didn't look up. "I got the promotion." He pulled one side of the headphones off. "Which one?" "Senior operations manager, the one I interviewed for twice. The one I've been talking about for 4 months. "Oh," he nodded slowly, the way you nod when someone tells you the grocery store was out of the pasta you wanted. "Cool, congratulations." And then he put the headphones back on. I stood in the entryway of my own house for probably 30 seconds, just standing there holding my keys. The bottle of wine was still in the rack by the refrigerator. I didn't open it. I went upstairs, changed out of my work clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet for a long time. I told myself it was a bad day for him. I told myself he'd be more excited later, when it had sunk in. I told myself a lot of things that I wanted to be true. That was a Thursday. By Saturday, I'd stopped telling myself things. It started, like a lot of things in our marriage had started lately, with his phone. He was on a call in the kitchen, and I was passing through to get water, and I heard him say my promotion the same way you'd say a thing that happened. Flat. Informational. Like reading off a receipt. He was talking to his brother. I heard him say, "Yeah, she got some manager thing at work," and then laugh at something his brother said and then move on to talking about football. Some manager thing. I filled my glass. I went back upstairs. I didn't say anything. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks where I went to work and came home and tried to have normal conversations with my husband about normal things and kept waiting for him to ask me something, anything, about the new role. What it meant. What I'd be doing. Whether I was nervous. Whether I was excited. Whether I needed to talk through anything. He never asked. What he did do, on a Tuesday evening in October, was sit down across from me at the kitchen table with a look on his face that I can only describe as, "I've already decided this. I just need you to agree." "I talked to my mom," he said. His mother lived about 3 hours away, in a house she'd shared with his father, until his father passed 2 years ago. She'd been struggling, I knew that. I'd never been unkind about it. "She's having a hard time with the house," he said. "The maintenance, the bills. She can't really keep up with it on her own." "Okay," I said. "I think she should move in with us." I put my fork down. "I think it makes sense," he continued. "We have the extra room. She can help out around the house, and we can keep an eye on her." "Curtis, we have a 2-bedroom apartment." "I know." "The 2nd bedroom is my office." "I know. You could move your stuff out, set it up in the living room corner, or—" "My office isn't a corner, Curtis. I work from home 3 days a week. I have a standing desk and 2 monitors and a filing system. People make it work." I looked at him. I looked at him for a long time, long enough that he shifted in his chair. "Did you think about asking me first?" I said. Before you told her? There was a pause. I didn't tell her yet, he said. I'm telling you first. So this is you telling me. This is me bringing it up. It sounds like a plan, not a conversation. He got that look, the one where his jaw tightens and his eyes go somewhere slightly past my left shoulder. She's my mother. She is? I said. And I'm your wife. And this is our apartment. And I just took on a new role at work that's going to require more of me, not less, and you haven't asked me a single thing about it in 2 weeks, but you've already figured out how to rearrange my home office for your mother. He didn't say anything. I need you to understand how that lands, I said. He said he did. He said he understood. He said we'd figure it out together. He said all the right words in more or less the right order, and I wanted to believe them, so I let myself. I should tell you that I love my mother-in-law. She's a kind woman who raised a man I chose to marry, and she'd lost her husband, and she was lonely, and she deserved more support than she was getting. None of what happened next was about her. It was about the way my husband looked at our life, my job, my schedule, my space, like it was just background, like it was flexible, like it was the thing that would bend so everything else could stay the same. It was about the fact that 3 days after our conversation, his mother called me directly. She said Curtis had told her it was basically settled. She was asking about the timeline. He had told her. Before anything was settled. Before I had agreed to a single thing. I sat with that for a day. Just a day. Because that's all the time I had. Then I called my best friend, who I've known since college, who has never once told me something I wanted to hear instead of something I needed to hear. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which is rare for her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Tell me what you want, she said. Not what you think you should want. Not what's fair. What do you actually want? I didn't answer right away. I want him to see me, I said finally. I want to feel like what I'm doing matters to him, like I'm not just the other person in the apartment. Okay, she said. So what happens if he can't do that? I didn't answer that one at all. I went back to work. I threw myself into the new role the way I always throw myself into things. Completely, maybe excessively, because work is the one place where effort and outcome are still connected in a way I understand. My new team was good. My director, Diane, checked in on me regularly. I started to feel like myself again in those hours between 9 and 6. Then I'd come home. Curtis and I weren't fighting. That was almost the worst part. We were just quiet. We ate dinner and watched TV and moved around each other like two people sharing a waiting room. Polite. Careful. Not there. His mother's move-in date came up again in early November. He brought it up on a Friday night, casually, like it was a thing we'd already agreed on and were just finalizing details. She's thinking the second weekend of December, he said. Curtis. What? We never agreed on this. We talked about it. You told me about it. I raised concerns. You said we'd figure it out together. We haven't talked about it since. He set his glass down. So you're saying no? I'm saying I have a home office. I'm saying I work from home. I'm saying you got a promotion that nobody in this house has acknowledged, and I'm being asked to give up the space that makes my job possible. It's a spare bedroom. It's my office. People work from kitchen tables. I'm not people at a kitchen table, Curtis. I'm a senior operations manager who supervises 14 employees and runs reports that go directly to the VP. I need a door that closes. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said quietly, I feel like you're not being flexible. And something in me just settled, went very still. You feel like I'm not being flexible, I repeated. I'm not trying to start a fight. Neither am I. I just want to understand what flexible means in this context, because from where I'm standing, I've been incredibly flexible. I've been flexible about my time, my schedule, my evenings, my weekends. I got a significant promotion that changed my responsibilities significantly, and I've absorbed all of that without asking you to change a single thing. And the first time something is asked of me that requires me to say, wait, this affects me, I'm the one who's not flexible. He didn't say anything. I want to help your mother, I said. I do. But not like this. We need to find a solution that doesn't require me to dissolve my workspace. He left the room. I stayed at the table. I poured myself another glass of wine. I thought about the bottle we never opened after my promotion and almost laughed. Nothing got resolved that night, or the next night. What happened instead was a slow, steady pressure, little things, individually dismissible, collectively suffocating. He mentioned his mother's situation to his brother in front of me as though I was the obstacle. He started referring to the spare room even though I'd been clear about what that room was. One evening I came home to find him on the phone with the moving company, just getting quotes, he said. Just seeing what was available. I called my mother that night. My mother, who has known me for 31 years and has watched me talk myself out of my own needs more times than I can count. Baby, she said when I finished talking, I love Curtis, but I need you to hear yourself right now. I know. Do you? I was quiet. You got a promotion, she said. You worked for that. That's yours. And instead of celebrating it, you've spent 6 weeks managing his feelings about it. He doesn't have feelings about it, he just doesn't care. Mia, she said. My full name, which she only uses when she means business. Not caring is a feeling. I sat with that for a while after we hung up. Mia. My name is Mia. Nobody calls me that except my mother when she's trying to make a point. I made an appointment with a therapist the next morning. Not couples therapy, just mine. Just to have 1 hour a week where I could say things out loud and have someone reflect them back to me without an agenda. The therapist was a woman about 15 years older than me, practical and direct, which was exactly what I needed. After the third session, she said, It sounds like you've been asking for visibility, and when you don't get it, you make yourself smaller, hoping that will somehow make him more comfortable. Does that resonate? It resonated. So, what would it look like, she said, to stop doing that? I thought about it for a long time after that appointment. What would it look like? To stop shrinking. To stop waiting for him to notice me. To stop measuring my worth by whether my husband asked about my day. The answer when it came was very quiet and very clear. It would look like making decisions. I want to be precise about what happened next, because I don't want to make it sound more dramatic than it was, or less. It wasn't a big confrontation. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It was a series of careful, deliberate choices made by a woman who had run out of patience for being overlooked. I met with a financial advisor, not because things were dire. They weren't. I was making more money now than I ever had, and I was handling most of our finances anyway, a fact that had been true since early in our marriage and that Curtis had never shown much interest in changing. But I wanted a clear picture of where things stood. What was mine? What was joint? What would matter if things changed? I opened a personal savings account. I started directing a portion of my paycheck, from my job, from the promotion nobody had celebrated, into that account. This was legal. This was rational. This was something a financial advisor will tell any woman to do, in any marriage, at any income level. You keep something that is yours. I talked to a real estate agent just to look, just to understand what was available and what it would cost. I wasn't planning to leave my marriage. I want to be clear about that. But I wanted to know that I could. I wanted to stop living in a house where I felt trapped by the assumption that I would simply absorb whatever was asked of me. And then Curtis told me his mother had already given notice on her house. He told me on a Thursday evening in late November, sitting in the same spot on the couch where he'd been sitting when I came home with the news about my promotion. She's given notice, he said. She needs to be out by January 15th. Without us deciding anything, I said. We've been talking about it for 2 months. No, you've been telling me about it for 2 months. That's different. Mia. I've told you clearly, multiple times, that I need my office to do my job. That this apartment isn't large enough for 3 people, that we need to find a different solution. My voice stayed very even. I'd had some practice by then, and instead of us finding that solution together, she's given notice. She doesn't have anywhere else to go. She has a son, I said. Who has a job? Who can look into assisted living facilities, or senior apartments, or other options that don't require his wife to give up the space she needs to do her work. He looked at me like I'd said something in another language. She's not going to a facility, he said. She's family. I know she is. You're acting like this is some huge imposition. It is a huge imposition, Curtis. It's not a criticism of your mother. It's a fact. This would change our lives significantly. And that decision was made without me. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I thought you'd come around. 3 words. I thought you'd come around. Meaning he'd known from the beginning that I hadn't agreed. Meaning he'd proceeded anyway, assuming that eventually I would fold. Meaning my objections had never been taken seriously. They were just a delay to be waited out. I went to bed that night and I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark and I thought about 6 years of my career. I thought about the early mornings and the performance reviews and the glass of sparkling water and Diane smiling at me and saying the committee made their decision. I thought about coming home and standing in the entryway with my keys and hearing my husband say cool and put his headphones back on. I thought about some manager thing. I thought you'd come around. And I thought, no, I'm done waiting for someone to see me. In December, 2 weeks before his mother's move-in date, I had a conversation with my landlord. Our lease was month to month by that point. I gave notice. Not on Curtis, on the apartment, our apartment, because I had found a 1-bedroom across town, closer to my office, with a proper second room that I could use as a workspace. A real room with a door, with a window, with enough space for my standing desk, and both monitors in the filing cabinet I'd had since my first real job. The rent was $400 more per month than my share of what we currently paid. My new salary could handle it. I packed over the course of 10 days. I was methodical about it. I took what was mine and left what was ours and made a clear list of every joint purchase so that when we had that conversation, there would be no ambiguity. I had the list reviewed by a lawyer, just to be careful. A woman from a therapist referral network who specialized in exactly this kind of early-stage untangling. I moved on a Saturday. My best friend helped me. We rented a small truck and made 2 trips, and by 4 in the afternoon, I was sitting on my own couch in my own living room with a cup of tea, looking at boxes I had yet to unpack, and I felt quiet. Not happy, exactly. Not relieved, exactly. Something more like settled, like I had finally stopped bracing for impact. I left a note for Curtis. I want to be clear about that. I didn't disappear. I'm not the kind of person who disappears. The note explained where I'd gone, that my lawyer would be in contact, and that I hoped we could handle the next steps with decency. He called 40 minutes after I knew he'd be home. I let it go to voicemail. Then he called again. Then he texted, a long text that started with "What is this?" and ended with words I won't repeat here because they belong to the worst version of him, not the one I married. He came to my building. He didn't have a key. I'd made sure of that. I'd had the locks keyed specifically. But he stood in the lobby and called my name until my neighbor came out and asked if everything was okay. I watched it on the building's intercom screen. I called the non-emergency police line. I'd spoken to my lawyer about this specific scenario. I was prepared. The officer who responded was kind. Curtis left. He called my mother. He called my best friend. He called my director somehow. I still don't know how he got that number. And Diane told me about it the following Monday, with the most neutral expression I've ever seen on a human face. I told him I wasn't the appropriate contact for personal matters, she said, and then I told HR. I filed the paperwork to separate our finances completely. I met with a mediator. I hired the lawyer. All of it moved slower than I wanted and faster than I expected, the way these things tend to. His mother, from what I understand, moved in with his brother's family, which was an option that had apparently always existed. I learned this from my mother-in-law herself, who called me once, about 6 weeks after everything happened. She was gentle about it. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't known, really hadn't known, that Curtis hadn't talked to me, that she'd assumed things had been figured out. I believe her. You deserve better than how he handled it, she said. I didn't know what to say to that. I thanked her. I told her I wished her well, and I meant it. My new apartment has a room that I use as an office. It has a window that faces east, and in the mornings when I'm on early calls, the light comes in at an angle that makes the whole room feel gold. I have my monitors set up and my standing desk and a small shelf where I keep the things that mattered to me. A photo from my college graduation. A plant that I've somehow kept alive for 3 years. A card that Diane gave me when I started the new role that says, "You've earned this." I read that card sometimes on the hard days. The days when I'm tired and the work is heavy and I wonder if I did the right thing. If I should have tried harder. If there was some version of this where I found a way to be seen without having to leave to do it. And then I remember standing in the entryway of my own home with my keys in my hand, having just been told that my promotion, the thing I had worked toward for 6 years, the thing that changed my salary and my title and my mornings, was cool. I remember some manager thing. I remember I thought you'd come around. And I think, no, there was no version where I stayed and got to be fully myself. Some people will tell you that you should fight for your marriage no matter what. I understand that instinct. I had it too, for longer than I want to admit. But there's a difference between fighting for your marriage and fighting for yourself within it, and the second one. The one where you keep showing up and asking to be seen and absorbing the disappointment when you aren't. That one has a cost. It costs you in ways that don't show on the outside. It costs you in the quiet moments, in the dinner table silences, in the sound of your husband putting his headphones back on after the most significant news of your professional life. I'm not angry anymore. I want to say that clearly because I know how these stories can land, and I don't want anyone to take from this that I hate Curtis or that I wanted to hurt him or that I felt nothing when things fell apart. I felt a great deal. I still do sometimes. But I am here, in my apartment, with the east-facing window and the gold morning light and my standing desk and my career that belongs entirely to me. I supervise 14 people, and I have a director who respects me, and I go to therapy on Thursday evenings, and I call my mother on Sundays, and she always asks how work is going before she asks anything else, because she knows that's where I live most fully. That's not a small life. That is, in fact, exactly the life I worked for. I think about the bottle of wine a lot. The one we never opened. It was sitting in the rack by the refrigerator on the night I came home with the best news of my professional life, and it stayed there for weeks, and I walked past it every single morning on my way to make coffee, and I never once touched it. That bottle said everything about where things had gone without either of us saying a word. Here's what I've come to understand about what happened between Curtis and me. The ending didn't start with the move-in argument. It started the moment I accepted cool as an answer. The moment I told myself he was just having a bad day. The moment I made myself smaller so the silence between us would feel less loud. Every time I absorbed something that should have been addressed, I was teaching him, and myself, that my needs would bend. That my space, my time, my career, were the flexible parts of our life together. That his comfort was the fixed point, everything else orbited. That's not Curtis being a villain. That's two people in a pattern neither of them named out loud until it was too late. What I wish I had understood earlier is that integrity, the real kind, not the performative kind, means being honest about what you actually need, not just what you can manage to live with. I told myself for a long time that I was being mature, being reasonable, choosing my battles, but there's a difference between choosing your battles and quietly surrendering the war. I was surrendering. I just called it patience. The clarity, when it finally came, didn't feel like a lightning bolt. It felt like arithmetic. I sat down one night and I added it up. 6 years of effort. 6 years of growth. A promotion that changed my salary and my title and my future. And I looked at the sum and I thought, I did this. This is mine. And then I looked at the apartment, at the couch cushion caving in on his side, at the wine rack, at the second bedroom he wanted to give away. And I thought, none of this is adding up to what I'm worth. That's not bitterness, that's just math. What took me longer to understand was that leaving wasn't the courageous part. The courageous part was everything that came before. The therapist appointments, the financial advisor, the real estate agent, the list I had a lawyer review. The courageous part was refusing to make a decision from panic or from anger, and instead making decisions from clarity. From a place that said, I know what I need. I know what I built. I know my own value, even if the person next to me on that couch has stopped seeing it. I'm 31 years old. I supervise 14 people. I have a room with an east-facing window where the morning light comes in gold. and a standing desk, and a plant I've kept alive for 3 years, and a card from Diane that says you've earned this. I earned the office, and I earned the light, and I earned the quiet, and I earned the right to stop waiting for someone else to celebrate what I've worked for. The wine, by the way, I took with me when I moved. I opened it on my first Saturday in the new apartment, alone, with the boxes still unpacked around me. It was good. It had been waiting long enough.